Effort. When a person in the work has ceased to exert effort, they are often said to be drifting. To drift means to have no direction. In other instances, they are said to have fallen asleep. To fall asleep in the work means simply to forget all about it. For example, a person may become so immersed in life that they forget everything relating to this work. They are then not merely drifting, but fast asleep. In this context, we can then begin to talk about effort. The work depends on effort, it is based on effort, but effort of a certain kind. First of all, effort is in general distinguished by two types, mechanical and conscious. In a general sense, mechanical effort is what we have to do, what life makes us do to pass examinations or collect a paycheck. All animals, all nature, all organic life of which we form but a small part, have to make mechanical effort. For example, if it is raining, we have to put up our umbrella. This is exactly what is meant by mechanical effort, and by such effort we adapt to life. Conscious effort means effort that is not necessary in life, and is not occasioned by life. In other words, life is not the cause of it and the source of its origin does not lie in life. This means that some source other than the interests of life is necessary in order to make conscious effort, through which conscious effort becomes possible. Have you ever asked yourself if you really believe that there are any influences not belonging to life and coming from another source? Recapping then what this teaching says. There are two kinds of influences in life itself called A and B influences. A influences are created within life, by its clash and friction, by its jealousies and hatreds, by its ambitions, its wars, its crimes, its commerce, its interests, fashion, trends, decrees, laws and so on. B influences however exist in life, and they speak another language because they originate from a source outside of life, from what are called C influences, from people who have undergone individual evolution. C influences do not come from the circle of mechanical humanity, but from the conscious circle of humanity. However, it is impossible for C influences to reach life directly, as they would not be understood. Theirs is another language, one which we must learn slowly. So life alters them into what are called B influences. The point is that this system is based entirely upon the existence of these other influences, distinct from life, called B and C influences, emanating from C influences. That is why we have to learn a new language, and understand that if humanity did not possess an inner secret destiny, if mankind were not a seed, and often a very unhappy one, there would be nothing for us all save life and its interests. The inner destiny of a human being does not lie in material life. The seed that is mankind is capable of its own evolution, and only certain kinds of light and heat can develop it, not the light and heat of the sun which governs external life and is the source of it. This is noted because unless the two destinies of man are formulated in our minds, it is difficult to understand what this work is about. The work is what is called the fourth way, as distinct from the three other ways. It is in life, and so a person must know how to be in life and how to use life, to get what they want from life and at the same time be in the work. This is only possible for certain kinds of people, namely, good householders, who are those who do their duty in life, but do not believe in life. And we must realize that in this work it is not demanded that we give up life or anything of the kind. On the contrary, this work makes us realize that we must use life as far as we can for the experience of it. However, we must not trust life and get lost in it, or think that the goal lies in life experiences. Conscious efforts are efforts to awaken from the sleep induced by life in humanity. It is not in the interests of nature that man should awaken, for then we cease to serve great nature. Such efforts would be impossible if people were merely a product of nature, whose sole function was to adapt to life. Why this is mentioned is that if we do not see for ourselves and are certain that there are in life two quite different sorts of influences, two kinds of things, two kinds of literature, two kinds of historical figures, then it would be impossible to make conscious effort beyond a very limited degree. This is because in making the effort of personal work, the emotional center must open out, and in so doing can take its rightful role. If it is only turned to life and personal ambitions, vanity and narcissism, then it cannot come into its right action. In making effort, it is necessary to consider from what part of oneself the effort springs. A person may make effort against negative emotion in public. For example, for fear of making a fool of themselves before others, or of losing their job, status, and reputation. This is mechanical effort. As soon as they are at home and in private, they will express their negative emotions secretly. Conscious effort is quite different and springs from a different part. When a person feels the existence of A and B influences and realizes that C influences must exist outside of life, to account for the presence of B influences within life, they begin to feel the existence of something higher than themselves. This begins to awaken the emotional center, and to make conscious effort possible. Otherwise a person will only feel self-emotions and remain within the narrow sphere of their own existence. The most important conscious effort is to remember oneself. This is always difficult because we all forgot ourselves long ago, therefore it is quite impossible if someone has no sense of higher influence and cannot see the difference between A and B influences in life. Self-remembering must have an emotional factor, not of self, not of personality, but of something deeper, or if you prefer, higher than one's ordinary self. The factor of will enters into self-remembering, not self-will but conscious will. There are two sides to the work where effort can be made, and these are the only two sides on which a person can evolve. The first is on the side of knowledge, and in the case of this work, the effort lies in thinking about the ideas, then forming one's own individual intimate and personal inner connection with their meaning. Nothing is more important to start with. One must think, speculate and ponder, take into mind, reflect, compare and dwell upon in their own way, imagine and form their own fantasies, their own sense of the work, recollect as a genuine starting point in yourself. For once we form some starting point, if it is wrong it can be modified. The work then begins to shed a light in the mind. The second is on the side of one's being. Efforts on the side of knowledge are different from efforts on the side of being. It is quite easy to find this out for oneself. We can develop in two directions and two only, on the side of knowledge and the side of being. Only these must go hand in hand. The outcome is understanding. As previously noted, the work must be based upon understanding. One cannot adapt to it, as one does to life, outside of oneself. Understanding is the most powerful force we can create in ourselves. Nothing better can be sought in the long term than understanding, and in this work an individual is defined by their understanding. We are our understanding. So in speaking only of effort on the side of being, efforts directed upon one's being are different from effort directed to thinking about the knowledge of this system. The two sides of a person, the side of their knowledge and the side of their being, must be united to form understanding. This work gives us more knowledge than we have being to accommodate. So it is very difficult to unite this knowledge with being. The whole task, however, is to do so, and the first requirement is to value the knowledge, to like it, to wish it, to feel a desire and to thirst for it. Knowledge can only unite with being through some emotion, through some desire, through willingness and a yearning for it. We must will whatever it is that we wish to know. Otherwise knowledge cannot unite with being. We cannot work on our being apart from the knowledge of this system, and we cannot have any practical knowledge of the system unless we apply it to our being. We cannot apply it to our being, it cannot enter into our will and so act upon us if we do not wish it so, desire it and practice it daily. A person's ordinary state is that in which they do not will what they know. We act from our state of being, not from our knowledge. It is our will that acts, and our will arises from our level of being. So a person always knows better but acts worse, and as long as they are in that state, they have no unity in themselves and so no understanding, because there are two separate sides to them. For knowledge to act upon being there must be desire, delight, or pleasure in the ideas of the work, for nothing can pass from the side of knowledge to the side of being without desire or pleasure and longing, without willingness. Then a person will wish to live with what they know, to live their knowledge and their will, and in this way their knowledge will begin to coalesce. They will begin to practice. It is here that the whole valuation of the work and its inner background comes in. For everything in the work starts from valuation, and this means wanting something, for you do not value a thing if you do not want it. This brings our will to bear, and it is through that will, through willingness that we begin to apply the knowledge to our being. If we do apply it, then our knowledge will begin to turn into understanding through a union between the will of our being and the knowledge in our mind. As we all know, understanding is defined clearly in this system. Understanding is the arithmetical mean between our knowledge and our being. So we see that to have knowledge of these ideas is not enough. It is quite easy to see when a person only has knowledge but not understanding of the work. If we understand something, then we can speak of it in different ways. If it is merely knowledge, then we will speak of it from memory. Now, with regard to effort on being. Everyone must make conscious effort on their being daily, particularly at this period of time when most people are going to sleep. If you wish to take life as your teacher, then as previously stated, you must practice non-identifying with what life brings you, pleasant or unpleasant. Set aside a certain time every day. For life demands mechanical effort, but if we practice non-identifying, it becomes conscious effort. Only do it for a certain time, say 45 minutes or an hour, but keep conscious and observe yourself carefully. Take as your aim, for example, not to object to anything for an hour. This helps to see what non-identifying means. Afterwards you can relax with regard to work and do what you want if you like. But either work or don't work, and know what you are doing and do not fall in between centers. Do not drift for lack of mental direction, and do not at this time fall asleep. To relax is not necessarily to fall asleep. With regard to working on special things in ourselves, and making effort in relation to them on the side of our being, on the kind of person that we are and the way we react. First take your negative self, that is, your daily negative emotions, and try to see all that you are negative about, acknowledge it. This helps by itself. As you already know, it takes another person to make us negative. So ask yourself some questions such as these. 1. Do I think I am badly treated by someone? 2. Am I jealous of someone? 3. Is it mechanical disliking? This helps to formulate our situation to ourselves. Now try to formulate the answers to yourself. Then try to think what external considering means. External considering means putting yourself in another person's position and realizing his or her difficulties. It is one way of transforming life. So now become the person you think has treated you badly, or the person you are jealous of. Try to do this sincerely as it requires conscious effort. Visualize yourself as the person, and reverse your position, become that person you dislike or hate and criticize, then you are now looking at another person called yourself. As a rule, this will cure you very quickly, if you can do it. But if you are in an evil state of negative emotion, as we all are at times, then nothing will help you save realizing what you yourself are like, what evil you have in you and what you are really becoming. This is painful, but we cannot change without pain. The work is a mirror and everyone in it can help us to see our own self in that mirror. However, we will not understand this unless we see ourselves in others, or others in ourselves. External considering is the main way to deal with negative emotions. But it is necessary to understand what it means, and it depends upon visualization. External considering takes some time and it is difficult to do sincerely, which is lightly. It requires a great deal of effort to do so. But it acts on being directly. Some find it impossible because they cannot imagine they might be someone else, especially a person they despise. This makes the work difficult for them after a time. So let's speak of effort on depression. Depression is not the same as being negative. There is one interesting thing about depression to be noticed, and that is it affects all centers, even the instinctive center. Depression is not due only to loss of hope and belief in the future, although this is a common cause. It can arise simply from making no effort of any kind so that the centers are waterlogged, and on the other hand the state itself, however caused, is one in which the energy in centers turns sour. It can arise simply from a picture of oneself, as when we imagine that we are always, let's say, successful, and suddenly find that we are not. But whatever its cause, the state of depression must be recognized, and every kind of effort made to overcome it. Effort, because only effort will change the state, even the effort of doing just ordinary small and menial tasks. It is the conscious effort of remembering yourself that will instantly lift you out of depression. The reason is that it brings you into work eyes, into the eyes that feel the influences of this work, and out of life eyes in which the depression is centered. And here it must be added that you must fight to have the work in you. You must fight in your mind for the work, to keep it alive, otherwise it begins to grow cold. What is referred to here is the work octave. This sounds do as evaluation of the work, which means that nothing can begin unless there is valuation, which is nothing mysterious. You will not begin anything unless you think it worthwhile, and the worth of a thing is its value to you. If you regard a thing as worthless, you do not value it. This note do is not necessarily sounded just when you come in contact with the work. It may be when you hear the ideas of the work and they fall on some ready-made place in you, on magnetic center. You may feel that here is exactly what you have always wanted. This valuation is due to the action of the kind of magnetic center in you. And in different people magnetic center is of course different. But it lies in the emotional parts of centers, it lies in the places where you feel worth, where you feel valuation, for valuation is emotional. However, this first bloom will not last. It may be a very beautiful feeling, yet it passes away, having fulfilled its task, and you are left to the task of revaluation. For magnetic center may bring a person into the work, but it will not keep them there. No doubt everyone has known the first feelings of love, those extraordinary and unearthly feelings that come in early life, which are not physical but rather devotional, and which seem to be touched by influences coming from the higher emotional center. And then, later, comes quite a different task, that of practical relationship. It is just the same in regard to the work. Now take the question of conscious effort on mechanicalness, which is a very big question. Begin with talking, outer and inner. Talking is the most mechanical thing in a person. Remember, it does not only mean talking at the time, but talking afterwards. It is always easy to see when a person has been talking badly. And talking is not merely saying things, but writing them or showing them in some way by intonation, by gesture, by hinting, and so on. Hinting is a very bad example of wrong talking. Finally, it means talking inside oneself. Try to think over what you have said during the day and then think of the rules. People often infect one another by bad talking, they are dangerous to one another. And remember here that what is said to anyone in private is not to be talked about publicly. That is a definite rule. Now take another mechanical habit apart from talking. First we must observe whether it is in fact a bad habit, if it puts us to sleep. There are good habits which are mechanical, so why try to alter them? Distinguish between good and bad mechanical habits. Notice a clear example, for example laziness, greediness, and so on. Try to overcome it for a short time, while you have the force to do so. Never work on yourself beyond the point that it is useful, for then effort ceases to be conscious and becomes in turn mechanical. Everything becomes mechanical in time. Remember that. Everything that we do consciously is preserved for us, everything we do mechanically, since we did not actually do it, is lost. So effort must be conscious. There are actually no such things as mechanical efforts in the work. They belong to life. There is a class of efforts called in the work, efforts to avoid effort. This means that people make all sorts of useless and unnecessary effort and avoid exerting themselves for what is actually required. You remember the clown at the circus, that rushes about doing all sorts of useless things. This clown is ourselves. All through this work, on every side of it, the effort of remembering must be made. Memory lies in all three centers. Suppose then that someone reaches a state in the work in which they feel the necessity of making an aim, based upon what they have observed in themselves. They make an aim and then decides to keep to it. But in order to keep it, they must remember. We must not merely remember what our aim is, but remember why we made it, and what led us to decide to keep it. If we simply remember our aim as words, as a sentence, that our aim is not to do this or that, not to react in this or that way, for our aims should at first be not to do. It is not enough. We are only remembering in a very small part of the intellectual center. To remember in a real way we must go back and recreate the situation where we made this aim, think of its meaning and re-feel the circumstances when we decided to keep it. Full memory is a question of all three centers working together, and an aim includes all three. For if one is going to work against something in themselves, the thing, whatever it is, will be represented in the intellectual center, and in the emotional center and in the moving center, so keeping the aim will involve all three, and remembering it will also involve all three centers. In making effort on some side of oneself, such as a particular form of being negative, remember that everything goes in cycles, everything comes round at certain intervals. It is not that these intervals are regular, but that things recur or return internally, sometimes sooner, sometimes later. The point is that by observation, a person may notice and remember that this is so, and in this way they gain foresight and give themselves a shock before some mood, some state in themselves has properly begun. This belongs to the idea of making effort at the right time. Once a characteristic state or mood has gained sufficient strength, it is difficult or impossible to stop it, because it's too late. If self-observation, however, has developed that special memory of oneself that results from it, and can only result from it, then if this new memory is strong enough, it will give us a vantage point from where we can make effort upon some useless state, when it is beginning to return. We recognize it for what it is. If you really have begun to dislike it, then you will have an emotion to help your memory and thought. This will help, and it will also help to observe more, namely that the state starts up earlier than we thought, in little trifling things that we had not connected with it before, such as beginning to use certain phrases, or in a slight change of feeling to others, and so on. Fuller observation can help to recognize states of depression and to distinguish them from negative states. Depression is different from being negative. Try to see the truth of this for yourself. Observe that it is so. If you have not observed that depression is different from being negative, then you cannot see what is meant. Being depressed often happens to people who like to think that they are always bright, cheerful, and happy. In any case, it is not the same as being negative. Self-observation and memory of one's state of depression are most important, because unless we recognize depression for what it is, we may make the wrong kind of effort. It is only by understanding such states that we can work on them in the right way. Depression is often a result of illness, or rather when we are ill the possibility of being depressed is present. Being ill lowers vitality. This is not really depression but is due to the fact that when the instinctive center, which attends to the inner work of the organism and its chemistry, has to meet illness, it borrows from other centers, just as in war resources are taken from all kinds of sources. Instinctive center, for example, borrows often from the bank of moving center first, then from emotional center and finally from intellectual center. But this is not necessarily itself depression, it is a depressed vitality, and if one is careful to be passive to it, and does not identify with it when it begins, if we do not expect anything and are quiet and small in ourselves, there need be no depression, loss of hope and so on. But only a state in which one must not think and has to remain quite still, and silent in oneself. There are, of course, rhythmical alterations in the body which lead to depression. One must learn in illness and in such states of altered vitality to see where one is in oneself, and what one can do, what is closed, and what is open. To expect to be business as usual when one is ill, will make one depressed. This is wrong attitude. To be internally quiet, to stop imagining, to stop complaining, to relax, to realize one is ill and has little available force, is the right approach. Unlike depression, negative emotion is caused always by another person. The other person need not be present. We have something called imagination which acts instead. Imagination makes us negative, memory makes us negative, but it is always imagination or memory of a person. When the negative emotion arises from imagination or memory, it is generally a repetition of what we have felt before about the person in question, and after a time it is possible to observe it when it first begins, in which case it can sometimes be separated from before it reaches its full strength. When we are violently negative, it is not possible to do much. Why? Because we do not wish to, and most of us like being violently negative in the moment. We must realize that people love being negative, feeling they suffer, because they identify with it. That is all that can be said. But you have to see it for yourself. A great struggle is needed over a long period to begin to dislike being negative. It is so easy to be negative, that is the trouble. Only you yourself, in your deepest thought and understanding and feeling, can extricate yourself from the pit of negative states, by the light of consciousness and aim.